This is Kelly Florence.
And I'm Meg Hofdahl.
And today we're talking about The Stepfather. Meg, you picked this movie. Had you watched it a lot before?
I'd only seen it once before when I was like a teenager, so I didn't, it wasn't one that I had on constant repeat, but I had seen it, like I said, once before, and I thought it was time to give it another try, and I had been watching Castle Rock with Terry O'Quinn in it, so it seemed apropos.
Do you have the facts about this movie?
Yeah, so it came out in 1987. It didn't gross a ton of money, but it did pretty well enough for them to make Stepfather 2 and Stepfather 3. And then, of course, there's also the remake that got terrible reviews. I haven't seen it. They decided, I guess, in that one, in the 2009 one, they decided there were too many women in the first one. So they made it a son instead of a daughter. And they were like, we need more white men in this movie. So that rarely happens, where the 1980s one was actually there were more females in it than the remake. So that's kind of interesting.
Who's in the remake, do you know?
I think Penn Badge, how do you say his name? Badgley. And the stepfather is, oh crap, what's his name from Nip Tuck? One of the dudes from Nip Tuck that's kind of like slightly eerie looking.
Okay. Well, I skipped that one too. And I had never seen this movie before. So This was my first time.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Well, then I'm interested to hear what you think and what did you think going into it?
I had very low expectations because I was like, ooh, what is this going to be? But then Terry O'Quinn's in it, and I love him from Lost, and he was in like Millennium or something too, right?
Yeah, and he's in X-Files Fate the Future, and he's in a couple X-Files episodes, or just one, I think. And yeah, Millennium, and Lost. I mean, he's one of the best characters on that show, and so I'm a fan of his.
It was weird saying the word Millennium in regards to that TV show, because I haven't thought about that in, I don't know, maybe nobody has in like 2 decades.
There was a show called Millennium! Yeah, isn't it funny? Like, that existed. Not for very long, but it did.
Weird. So, the very first scene, he's got this suitcase, and my parents had that suitcase, and I was like, this is so old.
I mean, it's definitely very 80s. I love the first part of this. I love the first scene of this movie. And not because they showed Terry O'Quinn but because there was something so creepy about him just showering and shaving and getting ready, and we kind of like, are watching this very mundane sort of getting together scene, and then all of a sudden he walks down and it's just like the most intense bloodbath. I thought that was so cool.
I wrote like it's a bloodbath, and I could not believe it. It was so shocking. So I have a question for you. Spoiler alert, in this movie, he's a serial killer that goes from family to family. Meg, are there serial killers that do this? Have there been documented ones?
Well, when I
love when you take the recorder.
I took the mic right out of her fucking hand. I'm like, serial killers? Well, no, actually what was interesting, this was just a coincidence, but somebody had posted on Twitter, they're like, the Stepfather movie is based on a real life murderer, and instantly in my head I had an idea of who it might be, and I was right. This movie is based on the John List murders. Do you know about John List? Mm-mm. No. So I won't go into all the details, but basically what he did was he was just your everyday dad, and he got into a little bit of financial trouble, and this was one of the first like murders that I like watched a TV movie about, so I have very vivid memories of that movie. John List ended up murdering his mother, his wife, and his 3 kids, I believe, and they were all like in like 12 to 15 range, and he just waited. As each one came home, he just shot them in the back of the head, and he like made himself lunch, waited for the next one to come, shot them in the back of the head, like really creepy. But what was so fascinating was he was quite clever, and he had called, and like with the school, he'd called his wife's job, everything, so that they were set up to go on like a vacation for a month or whatever, so nobody looked for them for like a month. And then what he did is he played music in his house so it sounded like somebody was there, and then he put the thermostat down to the like or off so that it would be cold in there so no scents would come out, no smells. So they were not found for almost a month, and he had lined them all up in their ballroom. They had a ballroom. He had lined all the dead bodies up in the ballroom, and he was not caught until he was on America's Most Wanted decades later. And thank goodness for that show. And he was found, like, I think in Florida or somewhere far off from where he was from, and he had changed his name and all of that, and he was remarried. But when they made this movie, The Stepfather, he was still missing, and like they didn't know what had happened to him.
Can you imagine being like his new family and going to see this movie or renting it? And he's like, hey, this is based on me.
Yeah, it's like, I'm famous. Yeah, so as far as people, I mean, there are definitely a lot of, especially men, who called family annihilators, who they kill everyone in their family. Oftentimes it does have to do with something silly like money, and they don't want to admit that they're bankrupt or something ridiculous, so they kill their whole family. So, I mean, this is a very real type of horror movie where, I mean, it could definitely happen, and it has happened.
Yikes. So something that I noted, which was interesting, they show the couple, the adults, having sex. And I realized we usually don't see adults having sex in the movies that we've been rewatching. It's usually teenagers.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's true. They do have a sex scene, and then they kind of like show the stepdaughter like putting on her headphones, like, ugh, gross. That's true. It's funny how like the sexualization of teenagers and like why are we watching them have sex, and it's like when the reality is, I mean, the grown-ups are probably having more sex in reality, I think. I don't know, but maybe I'm revealing too much about my teenagehood.
I don't know. I just noticed that. And I was like, oh, this is weird. And it's like, well, it shouldn't be weird, but it felt weird. A couple of lines I noticed. I think the creepy stepfather was like, girls don't get expelled, because she got expelled. And she actually wants to go to boarding school. And then I think he also says father knows best, which I just like cringe. It's so gross.
It's really gross. And can we talk about the scene when she goes down to get something out of the cooler at the party, and he is like, he thinks he's alone and he's freaking out.
Oh my God,
and he's like
so
swearing.
Yeah.
Like, that is scary. That, I mean, it's so funny because it's like, this is a 1987 movie called The Stepfather. Like, it should suck, but it actually doesn't suck. Like, I actually enjoyed it because there were moments like that where I was actually chilled. I was just like, I had that cringy face during it because I was just like, oh my God, that it's real, you know?
The line when they're speculating, like, why would somebody murder their whole family? And he says, maybe they disappointed him. And it's literally his family that he's talking about, who he murdered. And it's like, that's so creepy. Like, maybe they disappointed him. Like, ugh.
Yeah, I mean, and I think what you're saying too is like Terry O'Quinn, it was perfect for this because he has that sort of like everyman charm to him, and he seems like, oh, you know, he's like a good guy. You know, like there's that, a lot of people complain about in The Shining, that was one thing they didn't like about Jack Nicholson being cast in that role. It's because he just inherently has a creepiness factor to him. And I think this is sort of an opposite thing, or is it the same? Does Terry O'Quinn have an inherent creepiness to him, or is he, I don't know, I'm kind of torn. What do you think?
I don't know. I can see why the characters in the movie found him charming, but I was creeped out. I don't know.
I can't decide if it's like a chicken or the egg thing. Like, does he just have a creepiness to him, or is it that he is an everyman, and so when he delivers a creepy line, you're just like, whoa. Yeah. Let's make a Twitter poll on this.
I agree. Okay, so the brother is cute. The brother of the murdered whatever.
Oh, his original family that he murdered, yes.
I thought he was cute. Mm-hmm. Just a side note. But then, okay, back to creepy Terry O'Quinn. He murders that guy while on the house tour. That's so bold.
Oh, yeah, that is. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, that's really bold and scary. And it's like the stepdaughter's one sort of lifeline, and the person she had who was like, Which I thought was kind of cool that you're the therapist, right?
Yeah.
It was the therapist. And I thought that dynamic was neat. And yeah, it was just really creepy and like, oh my God, like this guy is really becoming unhinged.
So the actress who plays the stepdaughter, I really liked her. And I was like, I recognize her from something. And I don't know if you've seen this movie, but there's a Phantom of the Opera adaptation with Robert Englund as the Phantom, and she plays Christine. And I love that movie. We'll have to rewatch it sometime.
Yeah, no, I've never seen that, but that makes sense. When I like IMDb'd her, it looked like she had been in a lot of like horror type things and stuff. So
Yeah, and she hasn't, I don't think she had done anything recently. Okay, so speaking of the cute brother, I love the detective work that he's doing because he's going to like physical libraries and things, which I always love. And then he does this detective work. He finds these missing pages from a magazine or in the house, and he goes to the library to find the same magazine and what the pages were, and that's how he figures out the city that Terry O'Quinn's going to move to next.
it's like this great like pre-Google era we're always talking about, and it's like, I mean, like the whole thing about her sending away for a picture and like she has to wait for it in the mail, and then of course Terry O'Quinn like circumvents that and is able to slip in a different picture or whatever. But it's like, to think that now we literally would just Google something and be like, is my stepfather a psychopath? Like, we would be able to find it in literally seconds. So it's fun to watch in this era.
I noticed she was the stepdaughter. She's on her first, I don't know if it's a first date, but she's on a date with this guy. And the first kiss that they had was so adorable and real. And in this movie, the teenagers aren't over-sexualized because, like, they are having this awkward first kiss. And then the parents come in.
Oh, and it was awful because, like, of course, because he has a screw loose, he, like, starts screaming. And I think he says, like, he's trying to rape her and all this stuff. And it was so innocent and sweet. And you're right. It is a good contrast of, like, what teenage sexuality really is more like. You know, when you think, like, about the way they portray it in like the original Halloween, for instance, where it's almost like adult, and it's like, so yeah, I mean, it is campy, but I think that it's showing clearly that more realistically, and there are just some really realistic things that make it so scary.
Another thing that I noticed the brother did, who's searching for his sister, he is like flirting with Miss Barnes. I think it's at a library to get more information or somewhere. And I just thought that was really funny because she was just like, I mean, sort of a dowdy woman. And
it worked.
Yeah. And then, so Terry O'Quinn, he's going and setting up a new life and a new job in a new town because he's getting ready to kill them. That, too, was chilling. John List was his name? Mm-hmm. Did he set up a life before he left?
I don't think so. I don't know about that. And he did not murder anybody that we know of after that either. So, he ended up marrying somebody who didn't have kids, and then he didn't have any more kids. So, I don't know if he set up, but it's creepy to think. I mean, there are people, too, that not even murder-wise, like, have two families and creepy shit like that. And, of course, this leads to that really creepy line that they use on the poster, and it's like, who am I here? And that was, of course, like, a super chilling moment where you're like, you just see the insanity, and then you think about what his new wife at that moment. Are they married? Are they married?
Yeah,
I can't remember if they're technically married, but I'll say wife, like, what must be going through her brain at that moment.
So this must have happened at some point around this time in the movie. There's always family dinners in these movies, and in this movie too. Did you have family dinners, like where you all sat down and ate at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, yeah, that you didn't do that.
Well, no, I mean, I guess we did, but this is something that I talk about in every one of my classes, and over the semesters that I've been teaching. I guess I've been teaching for 14 years now. A lot of families don't have family dinners, and so I always wonder, is that the exception and not the rule? people say, well, you grab a plate and you sit wherever, or everybody eats at different times. And so I'm curious, listeners. That's the other thing I'll do a Twitter poll on.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I guess it's funny how we just like, I just assume, I'm like, wait, doesn't everybody just do that? But, you know, for me, like, it's so funny. We always watch the news. So it's not like we sat quietly and had dinner. Like, the news was always on, and it was always NBC Nightly News. And so to this day, when I hear that show coming on, I get hungry. Like, it's like a Pavlov dog thing. Or if I hear like Tom Brokaw's voice, I'm just like, oh, suddenly I need a snack.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And so it's fascinating too. Like I said, the majority of people that we talk about, because we talk about culture and what we're used to as the norm and what we consider as normal, but it just is maybe a way that we're used to and then a way that's different. So anyway.
I was just gonna say, I was listening to a podcast a couple months ago, and the guys on there, they were like, oh, they're really weird, like they have milk with dinner every night. And to me, I'm like, wait, doesn't everybody have milk with dinner every night? What do you mean?
Yeah, it is fascinating. Some more old school detective work. This brother is going door to door with a physical photograph saying, do you recognize this man? Like, now it would be, you send out an alert or you put it up on Facebook and it gets this many shares. The things that we take for granted. And that's why I assume you want to set some of your horror stories in older times in order to get some of those things, right? Or what?
Oh yeah, I say all the time, like, cell phones absolutely kill horror. Like, it just sucks. I mean, yes, if I can get cell phones out of people's hands, that's like the first priority when I'm writing, because it's just, there's way too much information and way too much light that can be used with it and everything. So
yeah, this old school stuff is good. So Carrie O'Quinn, his character, he is a master manipulator. And then at this point, I was like, oh no, the brother's going to come in and be the savior and save all the women. And I was like going to be like, oh no, he's stealing the climax. But it didn't happen.
I was so happy. I thought the same thing because I didn't really remember. And when he came in and ended up dying pretty much right away, I was like, yay. Which, I mean, it wasn't because I didn't like him or anything, but it was because I was like, I cannot watch him go in there and save these women, and when it's their story to tell. So that was really a nice, refreshing thing.
Yeah, I was completely surprised. I'm like, oh, good.
Yeah.
The mother comes in, and I mean, she's not dead. I can't remember what exactly happened to her, but she comes back, and this mother and daughter duke it out and with him, but apparently he comes back.
Yeah, that's what I wouldn't mind doing, Stepfather 2 sometime, just to find out how they write that in, because, I mean, it looked like he got stabbed in the heart, and, I mean, it was brutal. I really I thought the climax was really well done, and it was brutal and bloody, and I liked it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they bring him back for Stepfather 2. I don't know.
Unless it's a prequel? I don't know.
Oh, it could be. I don't know. Let me look it up. One sec. Nope, it says he survived after being shot and stabbed at the end of the previous film. So, like all good horror movie monsters, he can take a few hits. And then
what year did that come out?
1989. So that was 2 years later. So it has Jonathan Brandis in it.
Who was your favorite?
I loved him. So we'll have to watch this.
So coming soon, Stepfather 2. Yeah, overall, I was very pleasantly surprised, and I think it holds up.
I think it holds up too. Like, I was rather impressed with the writing, and it has good reviews. I think it's 86% fresh, which I go into a movie called The Stepfather, going like, oh, this cannot be good. And like Father, and if you say Father Knows Best or something, it's like, oh boy. But it's actually well done and creepy, and I think a big part of that was the performances, but I also thought it was written well. And, I went in with kind of low expectations too, but as soon as that first scene happened, where he came down the stairs and there was that bloodbath, and it was just so quietly done and artfully done, I was like, oh, I think this is actually going to be a good movie.
The other thing I think they did really well was just the stepdaughter's dilemma of letting this new person into your life, whether he's a serial killer or not. It must be hard to have, all of a sudden there's this new person who is part of your life, who's calling himself your father, and it's gross. And you know, it feels like an invasion of privacy, especially since she and her mother were so close and they had been fine without him.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you and I both haven't dealt with personally, but I would imagine that if your parents get divorced and you have this new person in your house and all of a sudden you're supposed to share family dinners with them and you're supposed to like treat them as a family member or a parent, that has to feel, even if they're completely normal, that has to feel frightening and weird. And I think it's probably a topic rife for horror because it is an interloper in your life.
And especially then, you couldn't do, it's not like you could do a background check. You couldn't Google them. Like you said, it's just the unknown. Now I feel like, let's do a reverse image search and find out who they really are. But you were trapped in no knowledge.
And I think what you were kind of saying too was like she had this dilemma of she loved her mom, she was still grieving over her dad's death, but she understood and wanted to be mature and be like, my mom deserves to be happy, which I'm sure a lot of people have gone through as well. So I think they did a good job of really fleshing her out and making her a three-dimensional character.
Yeah, I thought it was well done. What do you imagine for our scale ranking for this movie?
Oh my goodness. Oh wow. Does he I want the old-fashioned telephone that he's on, and doesn't he like hit her with it or something?
Yeah.
Are you thinking anything better?
No, I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything like perfect.
There's not like an iconic. He doesn't have an iconic weapon or like, you know. So, okay.
So 0 to 10, 0 being you hated it, 10 being it's a perfect movie. How many old-timey telephones do you give The Stepfather?
You know, I'm going to give an 8 because I feel like the performances were well done, the writing was well done, and at the end of the day, it creeped me out, and that's not easy to do, so.
So I wrote my ranking down like right after I watched it, and I ranked it as a 7. But talking about it, I feel like it's higher. I mean, I'll give it a 7.5 telephones because it was solid, and it made me feel cringy in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, there were some cringe moments of the Who Am I is it was just a great moment where you're like, oh, he's like, who am I here? And it's like, that would be an issue you would have, especially if you're losing your dang mind. So I don't know, I thought it was good.
And that moment coming back to the basement when she sees him freaking out, when you see somebody acting in a way that's different in private than in public, or, you know, with people, with this certain group of people differently than they do with other people, that feels so unnerving. And, oh my gosh.
It's funny because it makes me think about, what's Big Little Lies? Mm-hmm. Like, at first, like, Nicole Kidman and Alexander Skarsgård, like, they seem like this perfect couple, and then you, like, see him be abusive for the first time, and you're like, I wasn't expecting that. And so you're almost like, oh my gosh. And so, yeah, it's like that private, that you see someone, who they really are. And he thought he was alone in that moment. And you see that. And that's disturbing. That's scary.
It is scary. Ooh. So, good job, Stepfather. Well, we hope that you're having a happy Thanksgiving today, and you're having a family dinner, not with, well, I mean, it can be with a stepfather, but not with a serial killer.
Let's just shame all stepfathers and stepmothers. I mean, that's gone back since Cinderella, so. Yeah, so you might be with your stepfather, but you just do what Kelly said, reverse image search. Make sure he hasn't killed his previous family, okay?
And happy birthday to Meg's husband, Luke.
It's his birthday on Thanksgiving this year. Woo!
Bye, everybody. Well, until next time, we'll see you in the horror section.
Bye.